I'm Sophia Langley, and a few months ago, I would have told you that I was just another woman trying to balance her profession, family, and the messiness of life. However, I am no longer able to say that. Not in light of everything that has transpired. Fixing things is not what I was born to do, but I became one somehow, a man who fixes financial ruin, emotional destruction, and unfulfilled promises. I didn't mind either, since I was the one who had to keep everything together. I didn't mind. That was my self-talk. I made sacrifices for years. I paid back the sums my brother had accrued while pursuing his limitless ambitions by saving his failing startup. I did everything I could to pay off my mother's obligations after she lost her job, never expecting anything in return. I put my career on hold to clean up the disaster they produced. I felt both needed and trapped since my family, the people I believed I could rely on, had grown dependent on me. The good daughter, the one who was always there, no matter what, was how I had always felt. However, when I turned 30, something inside of me began to change. I was worn out. She was fed up with being the only one who could solve their issues, and with constantly sacrificing her own goals in order to support the family. Not until the death of my grandmother, Margaret Langley, did things begin to shift. The only person who really saw me was her. She was aware of my family's characteristics and the burden I was bearing. I knew something was wrong when her lawyer called me because of this. It was more than simply willpower. I didn't have high expectations. However, I received a call from her attorney, Gerald Price, whom I had known since I was a young child. He invited me to his office because I wanted to know something crucial regarding the family trust. Unaware of the impending bombshell, I drove to his workplace the following day. As usual, his office was tidy, professional, and quiet. The air smelled like leather and old paper. It felt different today, though. I had the impression that I was entering a place where all I knew was going to change. Gerald greeted me and said, "Sophia, I sincerely apologize for your loss. However, we must talk about your grandmother's desires. Is something not right?" With my stomach churning, I inquired. I didn't anticipate feeling this anxious. Gerald walked me to the rear office, his expression solemn. "You received a message from your granny. Not merely a will, a letter, a video. Something she wanted you to have in case your family's plans didn't work out." A lump started to grow in my throat. My relatives. How could Grandma have known? Why did she think the plan wouldn't work out? I was given a USB drive by him. "She intended for you to see this. It is the reality of all things. Your gift, the faith, money isn't the only factor. Something more significant is involved." I was overcome with emotion as I gazed at the drive in my palm. My grandma had always been very cautious and wise. She never did anything irrational. I needed to know what my family might be concealing and what she had left me. Her visage, as composed and stately as ever, sprang to life on the screen when I hooked the USB into the computer. Her eyes were piercing as she stared straight into the camera, as if she were talking to me from the hereafter. "Sophia," said Grandma, "I understand that you've had your share of difficulties with your family and that this isn't easy. However, after observing you, I want you to understand that you are not their fixer. They are not your responsibility." For a moment, I was unable to breathe as her words struck me like a wave. Grandma had always supported me. The only person who had ever understood was her. "Sophia, I've left everything to you," she added. "I trust you. Not because I believe you need it. However, I also need you to make me a pledge. I've put measures in place to prevent your family from stealing anything that is rightfully yours, or from coercing you into giving up your rights or inheritance." I listened silently as Grandma explained the terms, the family trust, and how everything would be safeguarded in the event that I was ever manipulated by anyone, particularly my parents. Then came the last punch. 50% of everything will go to charity automatically if they make you give up your inheritance or your stake in Langley Holdings. They will not receive a dime. Her words weighed heavily on me as I reclined in the chair. Money and property weren't the only factors involved. It had to do with my freedom, my life, as well as my freedom to decide what was mine. My voice was no more than a whisper as I turned to Gerald. "Now, what should I do?" Gerald smiled reassuringly at me. "You struggle, Sophia. You defend yourself by fighting. Your granny orchestrated it all. All you have to do is maintain your strength. I felt completely different after leaving Gerald's office. A few hours ago, the world didn't feel like the same place. I was no longer only bearing the burden of my family's expectations. I didn't clean up their mess since I was the good daughter. At last, I was prepared to live for myself. And nobody could take that away from me, not even my own family. It seemed as though a cloud had cleared in the days after my departure from Gerald's office, but the clarity I experienced was peculiar. I felt more like I had just embarked onto a new path that was both exciting and terrifying than I was relieved yet. I kept thinking about what my grandmother had said. You are not their fixer. They are not your responsibility. It seemed like I was. Finally hearing a reality that I had long suppressed, because I believed I should be the one to keep everything together. Grandma's speech suddenly seemed like a subdued but stern order to quit acting like I was someone else, and to stop giving up myself for those who would only ever regard me as ATOO. I stayed up thinking about what Grandma had left me that night, while I stared at my apartment ceiling. Not just the cash or the property, but something far more significant, the freedom to choose, to determine my own goals in life, and to not feel bad about stealing what was rightfully mine. As usual, Reagan checked in with me over the phone the following morning. She had supported me through it all, and I believe she recognized that I was at a turning moment in my life. Hey, she remarked in a kind yet perceptive tone. How are things going with you? I sighed, searching for the right words. You see, it's just a lot. Grandma didn't seem to require anything from me. However, I'm not sure how to use all of this now that I have it, this freedom, this power. After a brief period of silence, Reagan added, You don't need to use it just yet. Just keep in mind that you possess it. The first step is that nobody needs an explanation from you, not your family. In particular, I gave a quiet smile. Reagan was correct. I didn't need to know everything at once. But whether I wanted to or not, I couldn't deny that I was already engaged in combat and safeguarding what was rightfully mine, my future, my inheritance, and my peace of mind had to come first. I gave Gerald another call the next day. I had to be certain of what I was handling. I knew that the system and the financial games that had been played behind my back would try to fight me, not just my family. So I wanted to learn every aspect of the trust and every legal detail. When he responded, I remarked, Gerald, I have a question. You mean my family is going to come get me? Gerald didn't think twice. They'll make an effort, particularly after watching the video. They will not tolerate it. However, keep in mind that the conditions are strict. You have a strong argument, and I'm available to assist them if they try anything. I inhaled deeply. Being in control of the power was one thing. Being ready for the next step was another. Reagan and I met that night at a little cafe close to my flat. Even though we had been coming here for years to discuss anything from life to job, tonight was different. I wasn't simply discussing my family issues tonight. I was discussing the next course of action, what I intended to do in response. When the words finally came out of my mouth, I declared, I'm not going to let them win. Not now, not when I have an escape route. Reagan steadied her gaze on mine while leaning back in her chair. Are you sure you can pull this off? You've had them for a very long time. It's your turn to present yourself now. You are worthy of having a say in your life. I nodded, a wave of resolve washing over me. She was correct. I no longer only fought for money. I was battling for something more profound. For the sake of respect. For the freedom to live my life as I see fit. Meetings with Gerald and my lawyer over the fine print of the trust took up the following few days. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was not going to be easy for my family to let go. I was aware of that. But the following surprise caught me off guard. It arrived as a phone call from my mom. I couldn't help but notice the edge in her voice, even though it was softer than normal, like if she was trying to be gentle. Sophia, she added, I believe we should discuss everything. I'm confident you know why we've taken the actions we have, and I firmly believe it's time for us to resolve this. Tomorrow, stop by. Let's resolve this. I remained silent for a while, simply taking in the information. I was aware of her actions. She was attempting to blame me. She was attempting to convince me that I was the one causing the family to fall apart and that I was in error. However, I was not mistaken. I needed to be reminded of that. Finally, I said in a composed tone. I'll be there. But, Mom, I'm not going to give up. Money isn't the only issue here. This time, it's about me. With my heart thumping in my chest, I hung up. I anticipated this. I couldn't leave them without a battle, but my fear had subsided. I informed Reagan about the call when we went for a stroll that afternoon. They'll attempt to control you, she stated gravely. For years. They have been doing this. Don't allow them to cause you to feel bad. You're acting in your own best interests. I nodded as the significance of what she had said began to set in. I will not allow them to prevail. I picked myself this time. I didn't get much sleep that night. I couldn't stop, wondering what the future held. As the daughter who always followed instructions, I wasn't entering that home. I entered as a lady who had at last mastered the art of independence, and I wasn't going to back down when I entered that room. Not for everyone, not even for my family. I awoke the following morning with an unaccustomed sense of peace. Prior to family gatherings, I didn't experience the typical tenseness in my chest. My stomach was not constricted, and I didn't feel the need to question myself. I had already decided on something. This time, I refused to be influenced by charm, guilt, or the unfulfilled promises that my family would constantly make. I took my time getting dressed. Rushing wasn't necessary. I didn't have to pretend that I was entering a conflict that I didn't want to engage in, since I was aware of what I was doing. I also had no intention of giving up. It was quiet, peaceful, and smelled precisely like the last time I was at my parents' house, vanilla candles burning. When the door opened, my mother was standing there, appearing calm as ever, but her eyes were telling. She was aware that things would not turn out the way she had hoped. Sophia, she remarked in a slightly too sweet voice, I appreciate you being here. I believe that we should discuss everything seriously, with a bland expression. I nodded. I felt as though I had done all the work once I was here. Even though I had practiced this moment 100 times in my mind, I had nothing to get ready for. I was prepared to confront them directly. I said plainly, Let's talk. As I walked past her and into the living room, my dad was already seated at the dinner table, wearing his typically grim face. As I entered, his eyes darted. But he remained silent. A tiny part of me was happy that Hunter wasn't present. For this, I didn't want him there. I felt the weight of their looks on me as I sat down at the table with my mom. My mother said, Sophia, her voice quivering slightly, we understand why you're upset. However, you're going too far with this. You don't see the wider picture. This is necessary for the family. This is necessary. I gave her a straight look. No, a mother. You must be in charge. I must continue to solve your problems, while you all do as you like. I must remain in the background and be the one keeping things together. However, I'm finished. She winced, but I kept my eyes on her. You've always acted as though I'm only here to correct your errors and pick up the pieces you left behind, but I've changed since then. I'm not there to protect you. At last, my father cleared his throat and spoke. You have no idea what you're doing, Sophia. This has to do with legacy. It concerns the future of the family. You're walking away from everything if you leave us. With a calm yet forceful voice, I shook my head. No, Father. You've always claimed that the family was the focus of this. However, the family has never been the focus. It has always been about you. Your needs and desires. You've never given a damn about my needs. Not once. My mom's expression twisted in exasperation. You're not correct. We have always been concerned. We have always made an effort to provide for your needs. You don't realize, though, that this is about more than just money. It's about us. You cannot simply discard everything, I muttered. I'm not throwing anything away. For once, I'm selecting myself. I have a choice in my future. I've made the decision to live my life free from your manipulation. A protracted hush ensued. For a little moment, it seemed as though time had stopped and the world had ceased to move, leaving just the truth between us, as if to conceal the weakness I had just revealed. My mother swiftly brushed away the tears I noticed in her eyes. I wasn't duped, though. Vulnerability wasn't the point. Power was at issue here, and I wasn't scared of it for the first time in my life. Her voice cracked as she uttered, You're making a huge mistake. I shook my head, saying, No, I'm not. For years, you have been making the same mistakes. At last, I'm recognizing it for what it is. A long pause ensued. I could feel the frustration in my father's eyes as he looked at my mother. In addition to his anger, I could see that he was afraid. They were out of control, and that uncertainty and that worry were stronger than anything they had ever attempted to do to me. I'm done, I declared as I got to my feet. I'm tired of being your all sacrificing daughter. I'm no longer yours to utilize. I started to go, but my mother abruptly got up and said loudly, Sophia, you're going to regret this. You'll see. You cannot simply leave this family. With my hand on the handle, I paused at the door. Mom, I'm not going anywhere. I'm leaving the person you've made me into, and I've never done something as difficult as that. I left the house after saying that. I didn't feel guilty at all this time. No embarrassment, just tranquility. Reagan was in the car waiting for me outside. She started the engine without saying anything, and I got in. She didn't have to inquire about the outcome. She saw how I had changed. You succeeded, she murmured quietly, understanding in her eyes. You made your own decision. I let the words sink in before nodding. Indeed, I did. I felt lighter than I have in years as we drove away from my parents' house for the final time. I had changed since I had entered that mansion. I was no longer the same person who had dedicated her life to correcting the errors of others. At last, I was who I truly, completely, and unreservedly was. And I felt like I was right where I was supposed to be for the first time in my life. There was a mixture of peace and pandemonium throughout the next few days. My heart was at peace. I was satisfied with my choice for the first time. The mayhem. Well, my family told me that. I thought they would respond. I was aware that they wouldn't simply stand by and let me go, however. I was also aware that this time the conflict would be different. I didn't enter this situation as the daughter who had to tidy up their mess. I was entering as someone who had had enough of making sacrifices for those who never considered her more than a tool. I was correct. I knew that the storm would come. It began when my mother called. I could sense the strain in her voice, even though she was attempting to seem relaxed and as like nothing was wrong. Sophia, she continued in a tight voice, we must discuss the family business. We need to make things clear, because there is some misunderstanding. Are you able to visit tomorrow? I didn't think twice. I anticipated what would happen. One more attempt to ensnare me and make me feel bad for advocating for myself. But I had had enough of feeling bad. I had had enough of acting. I firmly stated, I'll be there. But I'm not going to change my mind. I hung up, clenching my fingers around the phone until my knuckles were white. I was determined, not angry. I had already decided what to do. However, I could sense the weight of it, the constriction in my chest. The awareness that returning to that place would be like entering a battleground. Money was no longer the only factor. My life, my future, and my freedom to choose what I wanted were at stake. The regular path felt strange under my hands when I drove to my parents' place the following day. I couldn't go back now, but every turn felt heavier. I had moved on from that. I needed to finish it. My mother's eyes were not as warm as usual when I got there. She didn't smile or give me a hug when she greeted me. Rather, she simply opened the door and gestured for me to enter. There was a noticeable tension, with his hands clenched together in front of him. My dad sat at the dining table, waiting. I understood that Hunter's absence was probably for the best. His subtle manipulation was the last thing I wanted to deal with today. Sophia, my mother said in a strained voice, we have been conversing. We recognize your distress. However, you can't simply abandon everything. You're doing something wrong. In order to avoid experiencing the well-known twinge of guilt. I took a seat across from them. I muttered, I'm not making a mistake. I'm taking action that I ought to have taken a long time ago. My life is more important to me than anything else. My father leaned forward, his face grim. Sophia, this is about more than just you. The family legacy is at issue. You're abandoning all we've fought for. I didn't wince. No, father. It's like you're ignoring me. You've taken advantage of and controlled me for years. And now that I'm advocating for myself, you want to make me feel as though I'm at fault. Stop being dramatic, my mother yelled. It has always been like way. We have always worked together. Sophia, you were meant to be involved. You're discarding everything for the first time in years. I truly looked at her and came to a realization. She wasn't merely upset. She was terrified. She feared she would lose control of everything without me. and for the first time in my life, I didn't mind letting that happen. With a calm yet determined tone, I said, "Perhaps it's time you learned to do things on your own. I'm no longer your fallback. I won't continue to make all the repairs for you." There was silence in the room. Although my mother opened her mouth to speak, nothing came out. My father's face was contorted in bewilderment and incredulity as he simply gazed at me. His voice cracked as he finally said, "Sophia, this isn't what I wanted. We are related. Family remains united." I felt a burden leave my chest as I shook my head. "Dad, I'm not going anywhere. Because of the way you've treated me, I'm leaving. Based on your treatment of my life, as though it were under your authority." With a pale face and a low voice, my mother remarked, "You'll regret this. You'll see. You cannot simply ignore us. You will be haunted by it." The air was still heavy with tension, but I was not shaking as I gently stood up. I no longer felt scared. "No," I answered firmly. "I won't be sorry. Not now. At last. I'm living for myself, and I have long earned that sort of stuff." I turned and left the house without turning around again. I was aware of my actions. I wasn't leaving the family business alone. I was letting go of the version of myself that had always been dependent on their approval and authority. At last, I was making my own decision. Reagan was sitting in her car with her hands on the wheel, waiting for me outside. She didn't have to ask how it went when I got in. My eyes showed it to her. "Are you all right?" Her voice was gentle as she requested. I actually grinned for the first time in a long time. "Yes," I replied as I felt the burden of everything leave me. "I'm all right now." I came to a realization as we were driving away. The battle was far from over. It didn't matter, though. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself. Although the days following my departure from my parents' home seemed to fly by, I discovered a calm strength that I had never experienced before. I had stopped watching over my shoulder, hoping they would make me feel bad. I wasn't questioning myself. For the first time in my life, I was content with the decision I had made. I remained occupied. I had to. I was finally creating a life on my own terms, not only to distract myself from what had happened. I began working on new tasks at work that I had put off for years since I was constantly preoccupied with family matters. I noticed that I was grinning at the small things, such as waking up in the morning without feeling anxious about the day ahead. But I knew the storm wasn't done despite all that calm. I would be picked up by my family. They wouldn't simply abandon me like that. Consequently, I wasn't shocked when Gerald called. "Sophia?" he murmured, sounding a bit more solemn than normal. "I've been monitoring the situation. Your parents are about to take action, and I don't want to worry you." A chilly knot formed in my stomach. It was on the way. I was aware that it would. "Are you aware of their plans?" I asked. Attempting to speak steadily, they're attempting to challenge the trust. "But I don't have all the information. They don't believe you're sincere," he remarked. "They're underestimating you. All I ask is that you be ready. The fight is far from done." With the weight of it settling in, I hung up the phone. Even though I had anticipated this, it nevertheless struck me hard. They had not finished. They wouldn't let me leave without a struggle. Gerald and my lawyer met with me the following day. They were prepared for the fight. We reviewed the trust, its conditions, and the safeguards that were in place. It was sealed. I knew my family wouldn't give up without making things tough, even though there was nothing they could do. Furthermore, I wasn't merely battling for the inheritance. I fought for the freedom to live my life without their interference. I was prepared for the hearing when the official documents showed up. I was not afraid. There was no doubt on my part. I had had enough of being afraid of them. Put an end to your fear of saying no. The hearing day finally arrived. I arrived to the courts feeling grounded but not anxious. I no longer felt scared. It was this. My family would realize they couldn't treat me like way. There was more to the hearing than money. It has to do with freedom. I wanted to take back my life. My mother entered the waiting area while I was looking over the paperwork. She had the same polished, flawless appearance, but I had never seen the trembling in her eyes before. I didn't look at her even though she sat next to me. I didn't have to. "Sophia, I didn't want it to come to this," she replied in a low, almost beseeching voice. "You're doing something wrong." I didn't answer. I refused to let her guilt me into giving in. Never again. After a long moment, she whispered, "Please, avoid doing this. Don't leave us alone." Something in her expression nearly broke me when I finally looked at her. However, I stopped myself. I was unable to return, not right now, not after all that I had battled for. I said softly and steadily, "Mom, I'm not going to leave you. I'm leaving the person you've made me into. I'm leaving behind the guilt, the constant manipulation, and the way you've used me as a tool to solve your problems." I finished that. She remained silent. She simply gazed at me with wide eyes, as if she had never seen me before. I came to the realization that she would not change at that precise moment. She would never see me for who I truly was. She would always view me as someone under her authority who could make everything right. And I had to stop allowing that to occur. I held my head up as I entered the courtroom as the judge called us in. The money wasn't the point. It has nothing to do with the inheritance. I wanted to take charge of my life, and I felt relief, something I hadn't felt in years. When it was all over and the judge decided in my favor, I was victorious. More than that, though, I had made my own decision. It wasn't my responsibility to correct everyone's errors. The one who was at last free was myself. When I got home that evening, I sat in my living room and gazed out the window. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel as though something was missing as the city lights twinkled outside. My decision to be myself did not make me feel inadequate. I was pleased with my new self. Later that night, Reagan, as usual, stopped by. We sat in silence for a time, allowing everything to sink in, and she brought wine. She finally broke the stillness by saying, "You did it. You regained your life." With a smile tugging at my lips, I nodded. Indeed, I did. Then I understood that this was only the beginning. There would be difficulties at all times. I would constantly have to struggle for some things. However, I realized for the first time that I could manage them. I was confident in my strength. I was no longer merely getting by. I was still alive. And that was all. You must eventually quit allowing the pressure of other people's expectations to determine who you are. Love, loyalty, and family are all vital, but they shouldn't come at the expense of your personal fulfillment and tranquility. We spend so much time trying to make things better for others and mend the people around us that we neglect to ask ourselves, what about me? Realizing that you have the freedom to choose is the most difficult lesson, not simply advocating for oneself. When someone tries to take more than you can provide, you have the right to refuse. Nobody owes you your future, your tranquility, or your well-being. You regain your power when you decide to live for yourself, guilt-free and without shame. It's never too late to start living for yourself instead of other people. You should be valued, heard, and seen for who you are, not for what you can accomplish for other people. And choosing oneself is always the first step.